There are wounds that do not bleed, yet they ache in the quiet hours of the night. They live deep within the soul, hidden beneath years of forced smiles, polite conversations, and the practiced art of pretending that everything is fine. These are the wounds inflicted not by strangers, but by those who shared our table, our blood and our beginnings, the mother wound, the sister silence, the distance that has carved itself between family hearts. These are the unspoken griefs that God is now preparing to heal. You see, there is a unique kind of pain that only family can create, the kind that confuses love with control, that mistakes silence for peace, that teaches you to shrink yourself just to fit in with those who should have celebrated your becoming. Many carry this invisible inheritance, the ache of a mother who could not love you the way you needed, the quiet betrayal of a sister who stopped seeing you as her mirror, the distance that grew like ivy between hearts that once knew each other by heartbeat. These wounds shape us, often without our consent. They whisper, "You are unworthy." And for years we listen. But somewhere in the unseen, God begins to move. The divine does not rush the healing of sacred pain. He lets time expose what denial has buried. He lets silence echo long enough that truth finally has a chance to speak. The moment is coming when He will reach into the unseen chambers of your heart and begin to mend what human hands have broken. Because the pain that came from your family was never meant to define your destiny. It was meant to deepen your dependence on Him. There is something profoundly redemptive about realizing that the same God who watched you cry quietly in childhood now holds the authority to rewrite your emotional DNA. He saw when your mother's words wounded your worth. He saw when your sister's absence turned your laughter hollow. He saw the empty chairs, the missed apologies, the conversations that never happened, and while you were trying to survive the void, He was preparing the restoration. You were rewriting the restoration. Healing from family pain is not about pretending the wound never existed. It's about letting God teach you how to live without bleeding from it anymore. You don't heal by confronting them first. You heal by allowing Him to confront what their absence built inside you. Every tear you shed over love that never came, every prayer whispered over memories that still sting, is being collected by a God who specializes in restoration through revelation. He does not merely bandage what is broken. He transforms the meaning of your suffering until it becomes the soil of your strength. And now, perhaps for the first time, you are ready to release the weight of what they could not give, ready to forgive not because they deserve it, but because you deserve peace, ready to let divine love become the mother that never comforted you, the sister that never stood beside you, the family that never truly saw you. In that sacred surrender, God begins His quiet surgery. He removes the infection of resentment, replaces it with the oxygen of grace, and teaches your soul to breathe freely again. This healing will not come with noise or announcement. It will arrive gently, through moments that feel like peace returning after a long war. You will find yourself forgiving without trying, understanding without explanation, and loving without fear. The wounds that once dictated your story will become the very places where God's fingerprints shine the brightest. For when He heals the mother wound, He restores your capacity to receive love. When He heals the sister silence, He rekindles the courage to connect again. And when He heals the family distance, He brings back what was always yours, belonging, identity, and peace. Yes, the divine is about to do something sacred within you. What once felt like abandonment will reveal itself as preparation. What once looked like rejection will unfold as redirection. And when the healing is complete, you will not just survive your family story, you will transcend it. You will carry no bitterness in your voice, only wisdom. No anger in your eyes, only light. For you will have discovered that God Himself was the home your heart was searching for all along. There are pains that do not leave visible scars, yet they shape the way we see ourselves and others for a lifetime. These are the wounds carved not by the world outside, but by the people we trusted most, the family that was supposed to nurture, protect, and love us unconditionally. The truth is, family can be both the cradle of our growth and the source of our deepest pain. When love becomes inconsistent, when presence turns to absence, and when understanding gives way to judgment, something sacred within us begins to fracture. That is the essence of the mother wound, the sister silence, and the family distance. They are not merely emotional injuries, they are spiritual disruptions that distort how we receive love and how we see ourselves. The mother wound runs deeper than words can capture. It is not always about abuse or neglect. Sometimes it's about absence in the presence. A heart that was physically near but emotionally unreachable. Many people grow up yearning for affection that was never given, or approval that was always withheld. They learn to perform for love, to earn attention, to shrink themselves in exchange for acceptance. This kind of pain doesn't just fade with time, it becomes woven into identity. You begin to question your worth without realizing that your mother's inability to love you fully was never proof of your inadequacy. It was a reflection of her own unhealed story. And that is where God steps in. God does not ignore generational pain. He visits the very places where affection failed, where silence suffocated, and where love was conditional. He does not come to erase the memory. He comes to redeem it. You may not even realize it yet, but the ache you've been carrying, those moments when you felt unseen, unheard, or unloved, are the very invitations for divine healing. The wound is the doorway, for when pain finally becomes too heavy to bear alone, the soul turns upward, whispering for help it once thought it didn't deserve. That whisper is where healing begins. The sister silence is another invisible ache. It's the kind of wound that comes from shared blood but divided hearts. Perhaps there was competition, jealousy, or simply the quiet fading of connection that once felt eternal. You might find yourself wondering why she no longer calls, why her eyes no longer light up when she sees you. The silence between sisters can feel louder than any argument. It echoes with all the things left unsaid. The apologies that never came, the love that never returned, the laughter that stopped too soon. Yet even here, God works quietly. He heals not only through reconciliation, but through revelation. Sometimes He shows you that the distance was necessary for growth, that what separated you was meant to protect your peace. And other times, He softens hearts in ways only heaven can. Then there's the family distance, the slow erosion of closeness that leaves you feeling like an outsider in your own home. It's not dramatic, it's subtle. Fewer calls, fewer gatherings, and more conversations that feel hollow. You begin to feel like a ghost at your own family table. But even this isolation can serve a divine purpose. Sometimes God allows distance not to punish you, but to free you. The very separation that hurts your heart can also be the space where your soul learns to breathe. It's in that solitude that you discover who you are, beyond the expectations of your family, beyond the versions of yourself you created just to be loved by them. What makes these wounds so painful is that they attack the foundation of belonging. Family is supposed to be your first home, your first mirror of identity. When that mirror cracks, you start believing something is wrong with you. But God is now stepping into that broken reflection, not to replace the pieces, but to show you the beauty of how light passes through cracks. What was broken will become your brilliance, What was lost in your family will be found in His presence. God heals differently than time does. Time numbs, God restores. Time dulls the pain, God transforms it into purpose. He takes the fragments of the mother wound, the sister silence and the family distance, and uses them to teach you divine love, the kind of love that doesn't waver, doesn't disappear, and doesn't demand that you earn it. He rewrites your inner story until you understand that your worth was never in their acceptance, but in His affection. So when you begin to feel that quiet stirring in your spirit, that pull to forgive, to let go, to stop chasing their approval, it's not weakness, it's healing. It's God's hand, unseen yet undeniable, mending what was broken long before you even had words for it. The very wounds that once made you feel forgotten are now the sacred places where God is writing your redemption. One day, when you look back, you'll realize that the pain your family caused wasn't the end of your story. It was the beginning of your healing. And through that healing, you'll finally understand that what the family could not give, God Himself was waiting to provide. Healing is not an instant event. It is a divine unfolding. God does not rush what is sacred. He moves slowly, deliberately, with purpose. When it comes to the pain inflicted by family, the mother wound, the sister silence, and the emotional distance that shapes your heart, He knows that true healing cannot be forced. It must be grown. There is a timing to it, a rhythm only heaven understands. You may not see it now, but every delay, every pause, every season of silence has been part of God's preparation for your restoration. We often want God to heal us immediately, to take away the ache, the resentment, the loneliness that has lingered for years. But divine healing is not a quick relief. It's a transformation of the soul. God allows time to reveal what denial has hidden. He lets memories resurface not to torment you, but to release what has been locked inside your spirit. Pain has its own clock, and God is the keeper of that time. He waits until the soil of your heart is soft enough for forgiveness to take root. He waits until you have grown strong enough to face truth without breaking. He waits until you are ready to see that what hurt you was never meant to define you. There is a holy patience in God's process. Think of how seasons work. Winter must pass before spring arrives, and yet the tree does not rush its bloom. Beneath the frozen ground, life is quietly preparing. That is how God works with your heart. While you think nothing is happening, He is tending to the roots, the unseen parts of you that were wounded long ago. He is uprooting bitterness, pruning resentment, watering the dry places where love once lived. When the time is right, you will begin to see new growth, peace where pain used to dwell, compassion where anger once ruled, and freedom where fear once chained your soul. God's timing also protects you. If He healed you too early, before you understood the lesson, you might return to the same patterns that caused the pain. If He reconciled you too soon, before your spirit was ready, you might confuse dysfunction for love again. So He waits, not out of neglect, but out of mercy. The waiting is not punishment, it is protection. It is God ensuring that when He heals, the healing lasts. During this process, silence becomes His language. There are moments when it feels like heaven is quiet, when your prayers echo with no response, but in truth, God's silence often means He is working on something too sacred for words. The stillness you feel is the space where transformation is taking shape. Every unanswered prayer, every delayed restoration is a thread in the tapestry of divine timing. You are being prepared for peace that won't crumble under pressure, and love that won't leave scars behind. Sometimes God allows family pain to linger so that it purifies your faith. He lets you sit with the ache long enough to recognize that only His love can fill that emptiness. When no apology comes, when the silence stretches, when reconciliation seems impossible, He is teaching you to depend on Him, not on the people who broke you. Through the delay, you learn the difference between human affection and divine love, between temporary comfort and eternal healing. And when the time finally arrives, when God decides your heart is ready, healing begins subtly, like dawn breaking after a long night. You may not even notice it at first. One day you realize the memories no longer sting. The bitterness that once burned has softened into understanding. You begin to speak of them not with anger, but with peace. That is the proof that divine timing has done its work. Healing, once distant, becomes real. Understand this. Divine timing is not about waiting for others to change. It's about allowing yourself to become who you were always meant to be. God doesn't heal you for them. He heals you for you. He heals you so you can live without resentment, love without fear, and move without the weight of the past. So if you are still waiting, still hurting, still wondering when peace will come, take heart. The delay is not denial. The silence is not abandonment. The waiting is a sacred act of love. God is not withholding healing. He is preparing your soul to receive it fully. And when it comes, you will see why it took this long, because what He's about to restore will be permanent, complete, and beautifully divine. The pain that comes from your family was never meant to become your identity. Yet, for so many, it quietly shapes who they believe they are. The harsh words of a parent become the echo that defines your worth. The cold distance of a sibling becomes the mirror through which you see your value. Over time, you start to wear your pain like a second skin, believing that rejection means you are unlovable, or that silence means you are invisible. But that was never the truth. The truth is that your pain was meant to teach you something far deeper than despair. It was meant to awaken the divine strength within you, to draw you closer to the heart of God, and to remind you that no human wound has the power to erase divine worth. When a family fails to love you, it's easy to mistake their limitation for your lack. You think, if my own blood can't see my value, maybe I don't have any. But the pain was never evidence that you were unworthy. It was evidence that they were unhealed. People can only give love according to the level of love they've received. Your parents, your siblings, your relatives, many of them were carrying their own hidden wounds, passing down pain like an inheritance no one wanted, but everyone received. What you're feeling is not a reflection of who you are. It's a reflection of where they are. God, however, refuses to let that be the final word. He doesn't let the story of your identity end with the pain others wrote for you. Instead, He rewrites it. He uses every betrayal, every silent dismissal, every unreturned gesture to refine the soul rather than ruin it. When you start to understand that your worth comes from who created you, not from who hurt you, you begin to see your pain differently. What once felt like abandonment begins to look like a calling. What once felt like rejection becomes redirect. God allows certain heartbreaks within families to wake you up to your higher purpose. You were never meant to spend your life proving your worth to those who refuse to see it. You were meant to learn that your identity is rooted in something unshakable, divine love, the same love that formed you in the womb, that has watched you cry in silence, that has seen every sleepless night spent wondering why, that love has not changed its mind about you. The danger of identifying with pain is that it blinds you to growth. You start to live like a victim of your past rather than a vessel of God's plan. But the moment you realize that your suffering was not your sentence but your shaping, something changes. You begin to understand that every harsh word built your emotional endurance, every betrayal sharpened your discernment, every absence forced you to stand on your own 2 feet, until you discovered that you were stronger than you ever knew. The fallen shape, you discovered that you were stronger than you ever knew. Pain does not define you. It refines you. It strips away illusions, forcing you to find meaning beyond approval. It exposes false dependencies, reminding you that no one, not even family, was meant to fill the place that only God can occupy. The same wound that once made you feel unworthy becomes the reason you finally turn inward and upward, toward the one who made you whole before the world ever tried to break you. And when that realization dawns, something powerful happens. The need to prove, the longing to be accepted, the ache to be understood, it begins to dissolve. You stop begging for love and start embodying it. You stop chasing validation and start walking in confidence. The same people who once defined your pain can no longer dictate your peace. You become free not because they changed, but because you did. God never intended for your suffering to become your story. He intended for it to become your strength. The people who wounded you were part of the classroom, not the definition. They taught you how to rise above, how to forgive, how to see the world through eyes of wisdom rather than bitterness. The pain you endured within your family has become the soil in which compassion grows. You begin to understand others more deeply, love more sincerely, and trust more selectively. So when you look at your life now, when you think of the mother who couldn't nurture you, the sister who stopped speaking, the relatives who turned cold, see them as chapters, not conclusions. Their actions may have shaped your experience, but they cannot define your essence. You are not what happened to you. You are what you became despite it. And in the quiet, where your heart once broke, God whispers, "You are still mine." He reminds you that your value was sealed before anyone ever failed to see it, that your pain, as real as it was, is now the path toward a deeper understanding of love. You were never meant to carry the wound as your name. You were meant to wear the healing as your crown. Every tear you have cried over your family's neglect, betrayal, or silence was seen. Every sigh that escaped your chest when no one noticed your pain was heard. Every night you lay awake wondering why they couldn't love you the way you loved them. God was there, watching, not in indifference, but in divine compassion. You may have felt invisible to them, but you were never invisible to Him. He saw the moment your mother's words pierced through your innocence, the hour your sister turned cold, the seasons of your life when you kept giving while receiving nothing in return. Each tear has been recorded, not as a sign of weakness, but as a sacred testimony that heaven has not forgotten your suffering. You see, people often misunderstand the nature of divine observation. They think God watches only in judgment, but He also watches in empathy. When you were misunderstood, He understood you completely. When you were told to get over it, He knew that your pain ran deeper than others could comprehend. When you were left out of the family gatherings, left unread or left behind, He was gathering every moment of rejection into His plan of restoration. Nothing you've endured has escaped His notice. Not one cry, not one silence, not one moment of loneliness. There is a reason God pays such close attention to pain that others ignore. Pain is the proof of love misplaced, and God is love itself. He cannot turn away from what was done to you because He knows how sacred your trust was, how pure your intentions were. When your love was met with manipulation, when your vulnerability was exploited, when your forgiveness was taken for weakness, He did not merely observe, He wept with you. And while you were breaking, He was already planning your rebuilding. Think of it this way. Every wound you suffered became an entry point for His grace. Where they rejected you, He filled the void with His acceptance. Where they silenced you, He began to speak truth into your soul. Where they failed to protect you, He built walls of peace around your heart. Your pain has never been wasted. It has been repurposed by the divine hand that turns grief into glory. God's awareness of your suffering is not passive, it is active. He collects your tears the way an artist collects water to mix with paint. Each tear becomes part of the masterpiece He's creating from your life. The moments you thought were meaningless, those long walks alone, those prayers that ended in sobs, those days when you didn't have the strength to pretend anymore, He's using them to write a story of redemption so personal, so intimate, that only He could author it. When you cried and no one comforted you, He was not distant, He was near, closer than your heartbeat. Sometimes the reason you didn't fall apart completely is because His unseen hand was holding you together. He was the whisper that said, "Keep going," the quiet strength that kept you from giving up, the peace that came out of nowhere when you should have been broken. That was Him, watching, intervening, sustaining. It's easy to think that if God saw everything, He would have stopped it. But His vision goes beyond the immediate. He sees not only what happened, but what will come from it. He knows that the pain which nearly destroyed you will become the platform for your purpose. He understands that the betrayal that silenced you will one day amplify your voice for others who suffer in silence. Every tear is an investment in your future strength. Every heartbreak is the raw material for your healing ministry. And so He watches, not to pity you, but to prepare you. He sees every injustice and turns it into instruction. He takes what was unfair and transforms it into favor. Those who wounded you may never apologize, but God is already compensating you in ways you cannot yet see. The same eyes that saw your tears are the eyes now guiding you toward restoration. Let us watch the eyes of the sick, the pistant, the hungry and the poor. See what happens to their vision. You may not realize it, but your tears are sacred. They have power. Each one calls heaven's attention, and heaven always responds. God does not store your pain in vain. He transforms it into the wisdom and compassion that will one day help someone else heal. What once made you weak will become the evidence of your strength. So the next time you remember those nights you cried alone, remember this too: you were never truly alone. The one who counts every tear was there beside you, listening when no one else would. He was not absent during your suffering. He was present, collecting, comforting, and promising. And that promise still stands. Every tear will find its purpose, every wound will be healed, and every sorrow you carried in silence will one day be returned as joy beyond measure. Healing does not always begin with confrontation. Sometimes it begins with surrender. We are taught by the world to seek closure through conversation, to demand explanations, to face those who hurt us so we can move on. But divine healing moves differently. It begins not outwardly, but inwardly. It begins when you allow God to enter the places no one else can reach, the quiet corners of your heart where old pain still lives, where resentment hides behind pride, and where the echo of what they said still stings like it was yesterday. True healing is not about getting answers from them. It's about letting God rewrite what their actions told you about yourself. Many think that confronting those who hurt them will bring peace, but sometimes it only reopens wounds that God was already trying to close. Because peace is not found in the apology you never got. It's found in the presence of the one who understands why it hurts so much. When you let God confront what their absence built inside you, the anger, the shame, the fear of being unlovable, you begin to heal at the level of the soul. He does not need you to revisit the battlefield. He needs you to lay down your sword. Forgiveness is not weakness. It is an act of divine trust. It's you saying, God, I give this pain back to you. I release what I cannot fix. And that release is where the miracle begins. When you stop trying to make them understand, you create space for God to give you understanding. When you stop waiting for them to admit what they did, you make room for heaven to reveal what it meant. Because everything that happened to you has meaning, even the silence, even the betrayal. Nothing was wasted. God uses it all to awaken strengths within you that comfort could never teach. You must understand, God heals in layers. He doesn't just mend the surface. He goes deeper. He reaches the root of bitterness that grew when your love was rejected, the root of self-doubt planted by cruel words, the root of fear watered by neglect. He removes these one by one, patiently, tenderly, like a gardener removing weeds, so new life can grow. And as he works, you begin to see that healing was never about changing them. It was about transforming you. Sometimes the hardest part of healing is realizing that you will never get the apology you deserve. But that's also where your power lies, because when you stop waiting for people to set you free, you begin to realize that freedom was yours all along. You just had to choose it. Confrontation might bring temporary satisfaction, but surrender brings lasting peace. The moment you hand your pain over to God, you exchange bitterness for strength. You stop bleeding over what they did and start blooming from what God is doing. When you surrender the wound, God begins his quiet work. You may not feel it at first. It happens slowly, like the soft return of sunlight after a long night. One day you'll notice that you no longer feel the need to explain your story. You no longer replay the arguments in your head. You'll remember the moments that used to crush you, and instead of pain, you'll feel peace. That's the evidence of divine healing, when the same memory that once broke you now reminds you how far you've come. God's confrontation is not loud. It doesn't come through arguments or dramatic reconciliations. It comes through revelation. One morning you'll wake up and realize you've stopped craving their validation. You'll stop hoping they see your worth because you'll already know it. The need for their approval will dissolve into the certainty of God's love. You'll understand that forgiveness was not about letting them off the hook. It was about letting yourself off the chain. And in that stillness, when you release your grip on the pain, something extraordinary happens. The same space once occupied by resentment becomes a dwelling place for grace. The peace you begged for begins to live inside you. You start walking lighter, speaking softer, and loving freer. Not because they changed, but because you did. Because God met you where you stopped fighting and began surrendering. So don't be afraid to stop chasing closure. Don't be afraid to stop explaining yourself to people who have already decided not to understand you. Let God be your closure. Let Him be your explanation. The healing you've been searching for is not in their apology. It's in His presence. And once you surrender your story to Him, you'll realize that He never needed you to confront them. He only needed you to trust Him enough to let go. Forgiveness is one of the most misunderstood forms of strength. People often think it means excusing what happened, minimizing the damage, or pretending it didn't hurt. But real forgiveness is nothing like that. Real forgiveness is an act of spiritual rebellion against pain itself. It is refusing to let the wound own you any longer. It's looking at what broke you and saying, "You don't get to define me anymore." It's releasing the desire for revenge, not because they deserve peace, but because you deserve freedom. That's where transformation begins. When you start to forgive, something divine takes place inside you. God steps into the very space that bitterness once filled. He begins to breathe peace into what used to be chaos. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting what they did. It means remembering it differently. It means looking at the same memory that used to bring tears and realizing it now brings understanding. It's seeing the face of someone who once caused you pain and feeling compassion instead of hate. Not because the pain wasn't real, but because it no longer rules you. God teaches that forgiveness is not about letting people walk over you. It's about refusing to let them walk inside your mind forever. Every grudge is a chain, every resentment a prison cell, and forgiveness is the key. When you forgive, you don't erase justice. You hand it over to God. You stop trying to play judge in a story He's already written the ending for. You stop fighting battles that were never yours to begin with. You release them into His hands, knowing that divine justice never sleeps. And here's the beauty. When you let go of bitterness, you make room for blessing. God cannot fill a heart that's already full of anger. The same hands you use to hold grudges cannot receive grace. Forgiveness empties you of pain so He can fill you with peace. It's a divine exchange, your resentment for His restoration, your suffering for His strength, your heartbreak for His healing. It's not easy. Some wounds are deep, carved by years of betrayal or silence. Sometimes you will forgive in layers. You forgive once and then the memory resurfaces and you must forgive again. That's part of the process. Forgiveness is not a single act. It's a daily decision to choose peace over poison. Each time you release the hurt, God replaces it with a little more light. Slowly you start to notice that the things that once triggered your pain no longer have power over you. There's transformation. Forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. It doesn't mean you must return to the same toxic people who broke you. Sometimes forgiveness means blessing them from afar, wishing them peace, and walking away for good. God does not ask you to let them hurt you again. He asks you to let Him heal what they already damaged. There's a difference. Reconciliation restores relationships. Forgiveness restores the soul. And the miracle is this: when you forgive, you start to see yourself differently. You realize that the power was never in the apology. It was always in your ability to release. The act of forgiving becomes an act of reclaiming your strength. You're no longer reacting to pain. You're responding to grace. What they meant for destruction, God begins to use for transformation. The very pain that once crushed you becomes the foundation for your wisdom. As your heart softens, your spirit expands. You begin to understand others' brokenness, not to excuse it, but to recognize that hurt people hurt people. You stop internalizing their behavior and start praying for their healing too. And that prayer, that silent act of compassion, becomes your greatest victory. Because while they may still be stuck in cycles of pride or denial, you've risen above them, not with arrogance, but with peace. And that peace is sacred. It's the peace that comes when you finally realize that forgiveness was never about them. It was always about you and God. You let go so He can take over. You release your grip on the past so He can place your hands on the future. You forgive not to erase the story, but to reclaim the pen. So when you forgive, you don't lose power. You gain it. You no longer live tied to the actions of others. You no longer depend on their remorse to move forward. You stop bleeding for what was and begin blooming into what's next. Forgiveness transforms pain into wisdom, sorrow into serenity, wounds into wings. And when you walk in forgiveness, you walk in divine freedom, the kind of freedom that allows you to love again without fear, to live again without bitterness, and to trust again without losing yourself. That's when you know the healing is complete. When God heals, He does not simply mend what was broken. He restores what was lost, redefines what was damaged, and resurrects what you thought could never live again. His restoration is never partial, it is complete. The family pain that left you hollow, the distance that fractured your sense of belonging, the silence that made you question your worth, none of it is beyond His reach. When He begins His work of restoration, He doesn't just return you to who you were before the pain. He makes you someone greater than you've ever been. Because divine healing doesn't bring you back to the old version of yourself. It reveals the version of you that pain could not destroy. What's powerful about God's restoration is that it often begins in ways you can't yet see. It starts quietly, beneath the surface of your heart, like roots growing in hidden soil. You begin to feel peace in moments where you used to feel fear. You begin to understand yourself without needing anyone else to explain you. You start laughing again, not because everything is perfect, but because something inside you has shifted. That is God restoring your joy. It's not about fixing your past relationships first, it's about restoring you first. He begins with your heart, your spirit, your identity, and once those are whole again, He aligns everything else around you. God's restoration is not only about reconciling with family, sometimes it's about releasing them in peace. He restores you to clarity, to boundaries, to wisdom. He restores you to the understanding that you can love people without losing yourself, that you can forgive without returning to dysfunction. In other words, He restores your strength, the kind that allows you to walk into your destiny without the weight of broken attachments. The very relationships that once drained you will no longer have that power, because He has healed the root of your pain, not just the fruit of it. When He heals the mother wound, He restores your ability to receive love. You stop doubting whether you deserve care, affection, or kindness. You begin to believe again that being nurtured is not weakness, that it's divine. You stop carrying her absence like a curse and start carrying it as a lesson. You realize that while she couldn't give you the love you needed, God always could, and He's been giving it in countless unseen ways your whole life. When He heals the sister silence, He restores your courage to connect again. You begin to see that you can build bonds without fear of betrayal. He teaches you that sisterhood isn't limited to blood. It's found in the hearts of those who understand your soul. The void left by the one who walked away becomes filled with the love of those He brings into your life. He replaces comparison with compassion, envy with empathy, distance with divine alignment. But because He replaces comparison with compassion, envy with empathy, distance with divine alignment, when He heals the family distance, He restores your sense of belonging, but not necessarily where you lost it. He teaches you that home is not just a place, it's a presence. You begin to feel at home within yourself, within God, within peace. You realize you no longer need to chase acceptance from those who withheld it, because now you walk in the awareness that you were never the one missing. They were. You were never the one unworthy. They were unaware. And that awareness changes everything. You stop defining your worth through their actions and start defining it through God's promises. You stop trying to fix relationships that were never your responsibility and start nurturing the relationship that truly matters, the one between your heart and His. When you let God fully restore you, you no longer need closure from people. You carry closure within you because His peace becomes your completion. That's the beauty of divine restoration. It reverses the roles. The same places where you were once wounded become the very places from which you now heal others. The same heart that once broke becomes the vessel through which love now flows freely. You no longer walk as the victim of your family story. You walk as the living proof that pain cannot stop purpose. And when others see you, calm where there was once chaos, kind where there was once bitterness, free where there was once fear, they will know something sacred has taken place, because no one heals like God heals. His restoration leaves no trace of the wound, only the wisdom, no trace of the past, only the peace. He takes your tears and turns them into strength. He takes your loneliness and turns it into light. He takes your pain and turns it into purpose. So when God finishes what He started, you will not just be restored, you will be renewed, not just healed, transformed. You will rise from the ashes of your family story, carrying no resentment, only radiance. And those who once hurt you will look at you and see the impossible made visible. A soul once broken, now whole, glowing with the unmistakable touch of divine restoration. And so when the work is finished, you will see that every tear, every silence, every distance had meaning. What once felt like a curse will reveal itself as a calling. You will understand that God never abandoned you in the pain. He was preparing you through it. The mother wound that once broke your trust will become the place where His love taught you faith. The sister silence that once echoed rejection will become the quiet where you learned to listen to His voice. The family distance that once felt like exile will become the sacred ground where He taught you independence, strength, and divine belonging. In the end, you will no longer see your story through the lens of loss, but through the lens of purpose. Because God does not heal halfway, He restores completely. He takes the ashes of broken families and builds beauty from them. He redeems the pain that others ignored, and He turns it into peace that cannot be shaken. Every wound has now become wisdom, every scar a testimony that grace is stronger than grief. And when you look at yourself in the mirror, you'll realize something beautiful. You are not the same person who once wept for love that didn't return. You are the proof that divine healing is real. You are the evidence that silence can give birth to strength and that rejection can lead to revelation. What they could not nurture, God fulfilled. What they failed to protect, He restored. So walk forward now, not as the wounded child of yesterday, but as the healed vessel of today, whole, grounded, and radiant in the light of divine love. For the God who saw your pain has completed His work, and the heart that once bled in silence now beats with peace. You are no longer waiting for healing. You are living in it.